It is Mock Draft Monday, and today I want to look at this draft class more holistically and take a look at how the strengths of each round may shape which positions the Chicago Bears take early versus later.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for our Armada Player of the Week later in the show. On the show today, I want to take you through a build-your-own mock draft process, the same way that Ryan Poles is doing this, where they're not just trying to say, okay, purely who's going to be the best player available at 10 and then who's going to be the best player available at 39 and 41 and 72. That's part of it. But another part of this process is looking ahead and guessing, well, what's going to be there for us in the second round? What's going to be there for us in the third round? And the strengths and weaknesses of those rounds and what players we think might be available there could shape what you ultimately do in the first round if all other things are otherwise close. So I kind of want to look at this as a bigger picture exercise as opposed to pick the first pick, then pick the second pick, then pick the third pick. I think that misses some of the pre-planning process that Poles is going through here. Because ultimately, yes, you do want to draft best player available, and at no spot do you ever want to reach for a specific position because you feel like, oh, we just have to be able to fill that need or get a player at that spot. But at the same time, it's not just about maximizing that 10th overall pick, but it's about maximizing the draft class as a whole and feeling like you're getting everything out of this draft that you want to get out of this draft. And we've talked before about how there's a bunch of different things the Bears would like to do, right? You'd like to add a dynamic running back upgrade. You'd like to add a franchise left tackle. You'd like to add some offensive line depth. You'd like to add some tight end depth. You'd like to add another edge rusher. You'd like to add some more interior defensive line depth. You'd like to get a safety of the future and maybe get some more, long-term pieces at the linebacker and cornerback position as well. But there's like 7 or 8, 9 different things you'd like to do in this draft class. Not all of them are going to happen. Not all of them are huge priorities, but you can look bigger picture at this class and say, how do I get the most out of my draft class as a whole? Because you could go through as best player available, and maybe in the first round, best player available is a running back like Ashton Jeanty. And then you go in the second round, and the best player available is a running back like Travion Henderson from Ohio State. And then you go into the third round, and the best player available is a running back like Caleb Johnson from Iowa or, Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. And all of a sudden, you're not going to take best player available in that spot because you're not going to take 2 running backs. You're at 3 running backs and certainly not in 2 running backs in the first, 3 rounds. Maybe you'll take a running back in the 7th. You could double up at a position, but you're not going to double up at a position like that in the first couple of days. So it's not just purely best player available, but it's like, do I need to take the running back right away? When else can I get a running back? If taking a running back is going to be a priority, what do I predict is going to be there for me? I mean, that's really what it's about, right? It's less about shoeing and hamstring and pinning down a specific position and say, where are we going to find our running back? But it's more like saying, what's going to be there in the second round and what's going to be there in the third round? And if we think there's going to be really good players at X, Y, or Z position in the second and third round, maybe we don't need to take that player at that position in the first round. But if there's not going to be good players at that same position in the third round, then we got to make sure we address it in the first or second round, right? It's sort of trying to see what the best players available might be at different spots of the draft, and then making your picks to try and make sure you're getting the most out of each selection and not feeling like, crap, we didn't need to take a running back here because a really good running back was there, or we didn't need to take an offensive lineman here because a really good offensive lineman is still going to be on the board when we pick later on in this draft. And so I think you look at it from the perspective of where is their depth, right? You're never going to know for sure who's going to still be on the board or not on the board 39 picks into the draft, or certainly not 72 picks in the draft. You can guess, and you can have a range of players available, but you're never going to know exactly who. But the idea is that you want to know where there's depth. Are there going to be a lot of different options at a position, or are there only going to be a couple options at the position? With the idea that if there's only a couple options at that position, you're less likely to get a chance to take one that you like. Whereas if there's a lot of options at that position, you're more likely to have multiple guys you like at that spot to make that a good spot to potentially draft those players. So like let's go more specifically with some examples here instead of going so broad with this conversation. If you look at this draft class, I think there's going to be a lot of great edge rushers available with the 10th pick. We've talked about Mykel Williams from Georgia, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, James Pierce from Tennessee, Mike Green from Marshall. Like, yeah, maybe you don't love using the 10th pick on there, but it's clear you're going to have 3 or 4 edge rushers to pick from at that spot. There's going to be a lot of different edge options you like at 10. But then you look in the second round where the Bears are picking 39th and 41st. In that range of the draft, there aren't nearly as many edge rushers you really like. You know, there's somebody like Landon Jackson from Arkansas, maybe JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State, maybe Jack Sawyer from Ohio State as well, but like there's maybe 2 or 3 guys, but not 4 guys you love, and it becomes harder to count on guys you really like all being there and being options for you there. But then you jump to the third round when the Bears pick at 72, and you think maybe Brady Swinson from LSU could be there, Olu Oladejo from UCLA, Jordan Birch from Oregon, Josiah Stewart from Michigan. Like, all of a sudden, there could be a nice concentration of players you like there. So maybe look at the edge rusher position in particular and say, if we want to prioritize edge rusher, we might need to either do that in the first round or the third round, but we can't necessarily count as likely on there being players there in the second round. And I think you can kind of do this for each round of where the Bears are picking and each position. You know, like I think there's going to be options on the offensive line in the first round, whether it's Will Campbell, Armand Membu, or Kelvin Banks from Texas, maybe Josh Simmons from Ohio State. Like, you should have a choice of a couple decent offensive linemen in the first round. There should be some good offensive linemen in the second round, you know, like Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, or the Arizona tackle Jonah Savanoia, who's got the crazy long last name. There's some real depth there in that second round at both offensive tackle and offensive guard. You know, Arianta Easley at tackle, on the interior, maybe Gray Zabel, Tyler Booker, Tate Ratledge. Like, boom, should be some options in the second round there for those 2 picks. Third round, it thins out a little bit more. Maybe Marcus Mbow from Purdue, maybe Jared Wilson from Georgia, maybe Wyatt Milam from West Virginia, but that's about it. So maybe you feel like if we want to address O-line in a meaningful way, it's got to be in the first or second round, because third round and later is just not going to be the way we particularly want to prioritize this. And so that's how I think Ryan Poles is looking at this bigger picture. Like, I think O-line, running back, and tight end are first and second round positions, but the third round is not as deep for where the Bears are picking for players at those spots. Whereas, like, defensive tackle, there's not really a great first-round defensive tackle option that you love, maybe Kenneth Grant from Michigan, but there's going to be guys there in the second and third round that you like, so you don't have to get one earlier versus later there. But maybe at safety, not a lot of options in the first or second round, but there could be some more options in the third round, so you can start to piece together here, okay, how can I stack my decision-making here to prioritize the areas when I think they're going to be available and not count on players being available at a position at a spot in the draft where, oh no, it turns out there weren't very many options and we didn't get to choose what we really liked there. So that's how I want to build our mock drafts here now with more specific players. And how do you stack the 10th pick, the 39th pick, the 41st pick, and the 72nd pick to get the best combination of 4 players that gives you the draft you really feel great about? We'll go through some different options here next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know your Amazon Fire TV is also an Xbox? That's right, you can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with the Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. You can dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and so much more, all just as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple and it's all on your Amazon Fire TV. The great part about it is it's more affordable and easier to travel with. So you can take your games or your kids' games on the go and plug in wherever you are, while also having access to all of your shows, movies, and streaming opportunities. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, and Fire TV Cube. So I think we can get a decent sense of where the strengths and weaknesses of this draft depth might be. Where O-line you want to do in the first couple of rounds, running back you want to do in the first couple of rounds, tight end first couple of rounds, edge rushers maybe more like first round or wait until the third. Defensive tackle more like second and third round. If you want to go corner, first and second round look better than the third round there. And then safety, there's not a lot of depth there until you get a little bit later in the draft. So maybe there's not as much of a priority to address that early on. And so for me, like especially at this running back and tight end position, right? It's kind of like, it's a little bit of a question mark because I don't know that there's another running back after Ashton Jeanty that I would want in the first round. We did a little discussion about this with Omarion Hampton, just not really for me being that caliber of Jeanty level running back that I would take at 10. So it's kind of like Jeanty or I'm waiting until the second round, but I'm not in love with the third round. So running back in the second round seems to be a little bit more of a sweet spot if I can't get Jeanty in the first round. Tight end, I think Warren and Colston Loveland are both up there as early first round pick caliber players. But if you don't get one of them, there's a couple guys in the second round, but it's not super deep in terms of having a lot of different numbers. There's guys right where the Bears range is, but once you get past them, then it's kind of late round options, not really much in the third. And then you kind of get into the fifth before you're really addressing much of that there. Edge rushers at the top, edge rushers at the bottom, not as many in the second round, but still a couple of options there. Defensive tackles, nothing in the first, but plenty of guys in the second and third you're going to like. And so how do we then use that to shape our own mock draft? And I like this as sort of a choose your own adventure book, right? If we put a player from each position for each spot, and then you can kind of pick your combination of guys here. Like say you get your dream of Ashton Jeanty with the 10th overall pick. He's on the board. You take him at 10 and boom, you've got your running back position addressed there. Okay, now you've got 2 second-round picks and a third-round pick to address other premium positions that you really want to fill in this draft. And this all just becomes a question of what you are prioritizing. Is it more important for you to address the offensive line or the defensive line? Is it more important for you to address the edge rusher or the defensive tackle on the defensive line? And then how important is it for you to address a spot like tight end or a spot like safety or even cornerback or linebacker at some point early in this draft versus later in this draft? And so I like the idea of okay, if you're going with Jeanty in the first round, right, then is there an ability to then get into the trenches a little bit more and go with somebody like Tyleik Williams from Ohio State as a big defensive tackle on the interior to give you some depth there, a long-term option for Andrew Billings' replacement. And if Zach Pickens doesn't work out, you've got another young player developing in there, and Grady Jarrett's on the wrong side of 30. To load up depth at that position makes a lot of sense for me there. And it's a spot in the draft where defensive tackle is really going to be a potential strength and premium right there. But then you got 2 second-round picks, so you could go O-line right away, or you could get another weapon like Mason Taylor and say, hey, let's prioritize the opportunities for Caleb Williams, because this is all about him. Let's get him as running back. Let's get him as tight end like Mason Taylor with the second of your second-round picks. And then you can still swing back in the third round and get an offensive lineman like Marcus Mbow from Purdue, who could play tackle, could play guard, and give you some versatility like that. And all of a sudden, you can find a lot of different combinations here of addressing all of the main things you want to address just in different orders and different prioritization. Like in that example there of Jeanty, Tyleik Williams, Mason Taylor, Marcus Mbow, you've got your splash running back upgrade that you hope can really take this team to the next level. Then you go back and get some of your fruits and vegetables here in a defensive tackle to give you more depth at that position that was injury-ridden last season, that they're going to be rotating guys to keep Grady Jarrett fresh, to keep Andrew Billings fresh, and you're not sure about the long-term future of Zach Pickens, so you're feeling pretty good about that. You really do need a number 2 tight end. And if you don't get one in the second round, you're kind of waiting until the 5th round because there's just not a lot of 3rd round options here. It might be Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green or bust there, because I think there's some more depth there in the 4th round, and in the 5th round, you can get more tight ends. The Bears don't have a 4th round pick, though, so anyone you're drafting after the 3rd round is not going to be a super premium player. So maybe you say, hey, Mason Taylor has a lot of potential to be someone who could be a long-term fit here and give you a dynamic duo with Cole Kmet, and then still circle around and add some good O-line depth in the 3rd round in Marcus Mbo, where it's like you're not using a top 50 pick on the O-line where you feel like, God, I need this guy to step in and be a starter right away as a rookie. And sometimes it can be hard to use an early pick on a player that you feel like is just going to be a backup. But on the O-line, Braxton Jones is hurt. Jonah Jackson has an injury history. Drew Dahlman has had some injuries. And using an early pick on an offensive lineman, even if they're not a day one starter, will probably still be a player that enters the starting lineup at some point this season. And somebody like Mbow from Purdue can give you guard and tackle and potential center versatility there. A little bit short arm to play tackle, but I think he could do it in the NFL, but certainly can be a really good interior player for you as well. And it's like, boom, you kind of feel like you've not hit all your birds with one stone, because again, there's like 7 or 8 different things you'd like to do, but with 4 premium picks, you got 4 good players that address 4 needs at different levels, but still feel like it's best player available and you're not reaching for any of those guys at any of those spots. You could do the same thing though with, like, say, Tyler Warren as your first pick at 10th overall. Say Jeanty's gone, Campbell and Membu are gone, Membu and Warren's the best player available, so even though tight end's not a huge need, you just take him there. But now it's like, okay, you got the tight end, but we do need to do some work here. You still want to add some O-line depth. You do want to address the running back at some point and the D-line at some point. So maybe in the 2nd round, you grab Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, another guy who could compete to start at left tackle right away, but could also be a guard for you and be depth there, so it could be a versatile piece for you. Maybe then you grab the running back everyone associates with Ben Johnson in Caleb Johnson from Iowa, who could be a great outside zone threat and a good scheme fit for this offense. But now it's like, oh no, I've just went offense on my first 3 picks, tight end, O-line, running back. I've definitely got to circle back to this defensive line somewhere and get somebody like Olu Oladejo from UCLA, who also I think feels like a Dennis Allen style of defensive end. He's a little bit bigger, stronger, and longer, but as a 3rd round pick, not an instant 10-sack guy off the bench, but can be firm and hold up on the edge and give you some valuable depth there behind Montez Sweat, behind Dio Dengmo. But you don't need him to be a starter this year or even in the next couple of seasons, because you're pretty locked in with the guys that you have in that lineup. So now you're feeling pretty good about the depth on that side, but you still made Caleb Williams a priority with Tyler Warren and Caleb Johnson and an offensive lineman in the case of Donovan Jackson here. And of course, you could swap out a different offensive lineman for Donovan Jackson there. You could swap out a different defensive lineman like Tyleek Williams we talked about with the first mock. To me, it's less about the specific player, and it's more about the position and what you prioritize there. Are you prioritizing running back, tight end as 1st round pick? And then are you prioritizing then O-line over D-line in the 2nd round? Are you prioritizing running back over D-line? In what order is it important for you to be able to address these positions? And that, to me, is the fun part about building these mock drafts. For me, though, if all else is equal, I want to prioritize. As great as Ashton Jeanty looks and as exciting as Tyler Warren can be, ideally, right, you would like to prioritize the trenches. If you take away the players specifically and just go look at positions, ideally, you want to get a star pass rusher or a star offensive lineman as your number 1 part. That player might not be there for you at 10. It might not be that sweet spot, perfect fit there, but that's how you would prefer to address, if the players are equal, what's the biggest need? I think O-line and D-line are still where I would like to go. So we'll go down those paths that maybe prioritize the trenches a little bit more and kind of find a sweet spot for at least my personal preference on how I'd like to see the Bears prioritize their needs with their picks in this draft. Next on Locked On Bears. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at NFL draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart, the guy we believe showcased the strength and power needed to push the Chicago Bears forward as we look ahead to next season. And if you want to talk about strength and power, how about Georgia edge rusher Mykel Williams? Sort of the top of the second tier of pass rushers in this draft class, and someone who has that length and strength on the edge, a heavy-duty run defender who's rugged, not afraid to get dirty in the trenches, and can conquer the road with capability and confidence. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Mykel Williams could do as an edge rusher in this Bears defense. It's clear that our player of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. If Jeanty's not there, and say even Tyler Warren's not there, because they're in this category of blue chip elite prospect in this draft or whatever, and teams prioritize that before the Bears get to with the 10th overall pick. To me, if you take them out of the equation, or if you just sort of make all other things equal, I want the priority for the draft to be the trenches, right? I want a left tackle upgrade. I want interior O-line depth. I want another top flight edge rusher. I want interior defensive line depth. That to me is where, in an ideal world, I am prioritizing in this draft. And so you may have heard in our Locked On Bears podcast feed, we did our Locked On Podcast network-wide mock draft, where we got all 32 of our Locked On Podcast Network hosts together to go through the first round and make our picks. And so when I was on the clock with the Chicago Bears with the 10th overall pick, there was no Jeanty available for me to select. However, both Will Campbell from LSU and Armand Membu from I'm blanking on what school I'm on. Missouri, the offensive tackle, were both there at 10. And so I went offensive line with the 10th overall pick because it's a combination of best player available and the position I would like to prioritize with a premium pick and my first of my premium picks in this draft. And it might be controversial that I went Membo over Campbell because I see Membu as more of a natural tackle. I see him as more of a scheme fit in terms of being able to get out in front, and I see him as somebody who can move over to left tackle without too much trouble. All this talk of him being a right tackle only, I think, is nonsense. And even if you think he's a right tackle only, I think you could move Darnell Wright to left tackle and be just fine with either one of them at either offensive tackle positions. But feeling like I got me a premium offensive tackle. But whether it's Membu or Campbell, let's go through this. Let's finish that mock draft then. Okay, you get to 10, you take the offensive lineman. It'll be Membu in my case, but it could be Campbell in your case if that's your personal preference. I'm not going to fight you too much on that one. I want to double down on trenches. Not necessarily offensive line right away, but trenches, and go, okay, if I'm getting my bookend left tackle with the 10th overall pick, let me get my pass rusher in the second round. Let me get Landon Jackson from Arkansas, or if you prefer, JT Tuilaoma from Ohio State. Or there's not a lot of great second round edge rusher options. But if it's there, give me a powerful, strong edge setter in Landon Jackson. If there's not an edge rusher I loved in the first round. I don't think there's as much of a gap here between the guys that might still be left there in the second round. Or certainly if Nick Scourton from Texas A&M is still available by then. But I'd be kind of surprised at this point. Give me an edge rusher and feel like, wow, my two biggest priorities to address in this draft, defensive end and left tackle, I've got them. Got them locked in both with my first two picks. Then I honestly want to double up on the trenches. Keep building the trenches, build from the inside out and get Tyleik Williams from Ohio State. Honestly, you could sell me on going O-line again and getting a guard with this spot, but I think if I'm already using the first round pick on an offensive lineman, then that moves Braxton Jones and Karan Amagaji down the depth chart. It means Amagaji could kick inside to play some guards. So it helps my depth as well if I'm starting with an offensive lineman. So I go back-to-back defensive line with my two second-round picks there. I go Membu, I go Landon Jackson, and then I go Tyleik Williams from Ohio State to say, look at my premium investment up front. It's what the Eagles did to get to the Super Bowl. It's what good teams do. They over-invest in the trenches because you can never have too many good players in that spot. And now that I've used my first three picks on O-line and D-line, here's where you can branch out a little bit. In the third round, I could get a running back like Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. I'm not sure there's going to be a tight end I love in that spot. I think you could go wide receiver there. I think you could even go corner there. But one thing in this draft I don't think we've talked enough about is I really want to draft a safety on the second day of the draft. I would really like to address the safety position with a pick earlier than your 5th round pick, because the Bears have a first, 2 seconds, a third, a 5th, and 2 7ths. And I don't want to wait all the way to the 5th round to address the safety position. I want to get a long-term safety of the future to replace Kevin Byard or Jaquan Brisker next season. And so if somebody like Xavier Watts from Notre Dame was there in the 2nd round, I would absolutely pull the trigger there. But I think they're going to have more options to work from in the 3rd round. I'd be super happy with Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State, who's coming off an injury, but he doesn't have to start as a rookie. Right? He can play a rotational role as he kind of gets back up to full speed, but doesn't need to be one of your starters. But I think in the 3rd round, you could go Winston from Penn State, you could go Andrew Makuba from Texas, Billy Bowman from Oklahoma, are all options there I think I would be really happy with as safeties of the future for the Bears, and feeling like I'm investing in the future of a position that you just don't have a lot of depth and like a long-term heir apparent there to take over. Or really, I don't love the depth if you have an injury there. Like, it's still Elijah Hicks and Jonathan Owens, and they were average-ish last season. Like, let's address that with better depth and a long-term starter and a player like Kevin Winston from Penn State. So, like, to me, that's kind of my ideal build-your-own mock draft here. Left tackle in the 1st round, Membu or Campbell. Edge rusher in the 2nd round, like Landon Jackson. Defensive tackle in the 2nd round, like Tyleik Williams. And then a 3rd round safety like Kevin Winston, where it's a player that can have a rotational role as a rookie, but you don't have to rely on to be a starter this year. But it's an early enough pick that you trust them to be a starter the year after that. And then boom, that's addressing everything in a really meaningful way that I would like to see. Now you can see a reality where the offensive linemen are gone. They weren't gone in our Locked On mock draft, but in a lot of mock drafts, Will Campbell goes 4. Membu might go 7 to the Jets or 9 to the Saints. And then if Ashton Jeanty goes 5 to the Jaguars or 6 to the Raiders, and Tyler Warren goes, 7 to the Jets or 8 to the Panthers, or somebody trades up for him or whatever, and all of a sudden all those guys are gone. I've said before, I find myself leaning edge rusher then. Like, if all the top players are gone and I'm stuck at 10 and I got to just take a player I like, give me my favorite of the 4 edge rushers. I personally have said I like James Pierce from Tennessee more than Mykel Williams, Shamar Stewart, or Mike Green from Marshall. It doesn't seem like the draft is going to play out quite that way. So if we just go with Mykel Williams, for example, as the 1st round edge rusher here, I still want to go offensive line again. I want to go trenches, right? Either way, we either going O-line first, D-line second, or D-line first, O-line second. Like, those, I want the draft to play out where I'm taking best player available and getting good players at those spots. So if I go like Mykel Williams first, and then Donovan Jackson from Ohio State second, again, a guy who I think could compete at left tackle, but could also be a really solid guard and could kind of play it, has really true versatility to play either spot. So I like him there. You could double down on Ohio State there and go Tyleik Williams again. Like, I'm not like the world's largest Tyleik Williams fan. I just think he's good value in the best defensive tackle there, and I think defensive tackle is a good spot to address in the 2nd round there. And then I'd still come back and do Kevin Winston or a safety with that 3rd pick as well. Like, it's just a matter of, to me, swapping 1st and 2nd round picks. Is it O-line first and then edge rusher, or is it edge rusher first and then O-line? And then give me more D-line, give me a safety in the 3rd round, and I'll feel really happy about how this Bears draft class comes together. I'd like to hear your mock draft, though, of those guys we've talked about, of the guys we've kind of gone through as different options in each round. Who would you prefer your big 4 Bears mock draft to come out and be? You can let us know in the comments here on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. You can tweet us at Locked On Bears. You can post in the Locked On Bears Facebook group. However you do it, just make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, you can always find more draft talk over on the Locked On NFL Draft podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. And also make sure you take a listen to the Locked On NFL Mock Draft, available on the Locked On NFL Draft channel. You can hear the whole thing and not just the Bears picks like we had on the Locked On Bears channel. You can go inside the Locked On War Room for all 32 picks in our ultimate 7-episode series. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Coming back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears, where we'll take a look at some of the biggest questions the Bears need to answer in this draft. And later this week, I also want to talk about the potential of trading up from that 2nd round pick to get back into the 1st round and grab one more 1st round player on with a 5th-year option contract. A lot more draft talk coming, and of course, we'll break down all the Bears draft picks this week as well. It's in the air. You can almost smell it up there in Green Bay. The draft is close, and I hope that makes it that much easier to bear down.